Hello everyone, I'm Niputa Maratisa Putri and my partner.
Aurelia Jessica Fabiola.
Today we will discuss about experimental research design. So this is the table of the contents. The first we will discuss about definitions, and the second we talk about types of experimental research. The third is the strengths and the weaknesses, and the last is data collection methods. So for the definition, we'll present with my partner.
Okay, first of all, let's understand the definitions of experimental research design. Experimental research design is a scientific approach to research in which one or more independent variables are manipulated and applied to one or more dependent variables to measure their effect on the independent variables. Or the simple one, experimental research is a research which has the purpose to find the cause effect relationship among variables in a controlled condition. So the next one is the characteristic. The first one is variables. The dependent variables are the variables being treated or manipulated and are sometimes called the subject of the research. Next, the independent variables, which are the experimental treatment being exerted or on the dependent variables, while the extraneous variables are the factors affecting the experiment that may also contribute to the change. Second, setting. Setting is where the experiment is carried out or conducted. Many experiments are carried out in the laboratory, where control can be exerted on the extraneous variables. So yeah, the last one is the multivariables. Is it like the may include multiple variables? So like the definitions before.
And now I will present about types of experimental research where the experimental research has been divided into three types, which are pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, and third experimental. The first I will discuss about pre-experimentals. There are simple form of research design and pre-experimental design are research schemes in which a subject or a group is observed after a treatment has been applied, in order to test whether the treatment has the potential to cause change. Although very practical, experimental research is lacking in several areas of the true experimental criteria. And the pre-experimental research design is further divided into three types. The first is one-shot case study design, in which a single group is studied at a single point in time after some treatment that is presumed to have a cause change. The second is one group pretest, post-test design, in which a single case is observed at two time points, and one before the treatment and one after the treatment. And the last is static group comparison, in which a group that has experienced some treatment is compared with one that has not. And the second, I will present about quasi-experimental design. It's a useful tool in situations where true experimental cannot be used for ethical or practical reasons. Quasi-experimental design includes experimental studies in which there is no control group, no random selection, no random assignment, and no active manipulation. In quasi-experiment, the participants are not randomly assigned, and as such they are used in settings where randomization is difficult or impossible. And the last I will discuss about true experimental design. It means that the researcher randomly assigns test units and treatments to the experimental group. A true experimental design is one in which the researchers manipulates the independent variable to observe its effect and some behavior or cognitive process the dependent variable while using random assignment of participants to a group in order to control the external factor from influencing the result. The classification of true experimental design is included. The first is the post-test only control group design, and in this design, subjects are randomly selected and assigned to the two groups, control and experimental, and only the experimental group is treated. And the second is the pre-test post-test control group design. For this control group design, subjects are randomly assigned to the two groups. Both are presented, but only the experimental group is treated. And the last one is Solomon 4 group design. This control group design focuses on the randomly selected subject being placed into four groups. And for the next one, we present with my partner.
So this is the example of pre-experimental research design with the title of Exploring the Short-Term Effects of the Strengthening Families Program on Brazilian Adolescents. Yeah, so in the background, the abuse and violence in the Brazilian adolescent is the primary health concerns. Therefore, the study sought to explore the short-term effect of the Strengthening Families Program. And for the method, it used pre-tests with 10 until 12 months follow-up evaluations. And it is qualitative study by using the interviews that held on 1 to 3 months, and the sample is included 126 adolescents and for the pre-test and follow-up comparison, and the 23 adolescents for the interviews, which from the low-income families residing in northern Brazil. And the result is it increased learning self-efficacy. And yeah, most of the adolescents when they are interviewed is applying the learned skill. The second one is the example of quasi-experimental research design with the title of The Impact of Entrepreneurship Educations or Entrepreneurial Intention. With the backgrounds is to investigate the impact of EE or EI in the context of Balkan country. Yeah, and it is a quasi-experimental research design, and the method is it used PSM and CEM by having the test of 528 adults and exactly using the triangulations method. And the result, it's have the insight for the governments for developing curricula and policy that aim at motivating university undergraduates toward entrepreneurship upon graduations or completion of an EE course of study. Last but not least, the example of the true experimental research design with the title Performance Text Assessment Supported by the Design Thinking Process. The background of this research is to analyze the performance of the respondent in a performance text assessment as supported by the principle of the design thinking process. And for the method, is using observational methods by providing students with the responsive classroom and relevant learning activities. For the result, the experimental group posted remarkable higher mean scores. And the implementations of the design thinking process can facilitate the teachers in creating a creative, interactive, engaging, and learner-centered classroom.
Okay, so now I will present the strength of the experimental research design. The first, the strength is the researcher can tailor the experiment to his or her needs, making it easy to determine the cause and effect, and the research will get clear conclusions. The second is the researcher can have control over variables and it can be used in many fields of research so that the researcher obtain desired result. And the lastly is the subject or industry does not impact the effectiveness of experimental research. It means that any industry can implement it for research purpose. And for the weaknesses, the first is it is highly prone to human error because dependent on the control variables can be implemented poorly so that it can eliminate the validity of experiments and research conducted. And the second is time consuming. It is because the large number of dependent variables being tested and waiting for the effect of the manipulations of the dependent variable to manifest, and it will take a lot of time to confirm it. The last is exerting control of external variables may create unrealistic situations. It means that eliminating real-life variables will result in inaccurate conclusion, which result in the researcher controlling the variable to suit their personal preference.
And so yeah, now is the data collections method. There are three types of data collections method in this type of research. The first one is observational study. It is carried out over a long period, measures and observes the variables of interest without changing existing conditions. And it is high risk in some cases, like the medical one. And for the simulations, it is the procedures use models to replicate a real life process or situations. And it's not recommended for the chemistry experiments. Last, the most common tools, yeah, it is survey, is to gather relevant data about the characteristics of the populations and yeah, the researchers have limited control over it.
In this slide, I will talk about the experimental versus non-experimental. The first is in experimental research, the researcher can control and manipulate the environment of the research, including the predictor variable which can be changed. On the other hand, non-experimental research cannot be controlled or manipulated by the researcher at will. This occurs in real-life settings where external variables cannot be eliminated, making it more difficult to conclude and non-experimental even though non-experimental is more flexible and the scope of the study is broad. The second is the relationship between cause and effect cannot be established in non-experimental research, while it can be established in experimental research. This may occur when external variables also affect changes in the research subject, so it is difficult to pinpoint certain variables as the cause. And the last is independent variables are not introduced, withdrawn, or manipulated in non-experimental designs. Meanwhile, independent variables are introduced, withdrawn, or manipulated in experimental designs. So, for the conclusions, experimental research design are often considered to be standard in research design. This research focuses on or more subject or dependent variables randomly placed in different treatments, where the independent variables are manipulated by the researcher so that the results are observed To be concluded, experimental research is suitable for research that focuses on examining causal relationships. And the unique of experimental research is being able to control the influence of external variables. So this is our reference. Okay, so that's all from me and
Thank
thank
you.
you.